Hi, everybody. I work with Al-Farabi Kazakh National University, which is located Kazakhstan, Almaty. As I know, you are participating in the two projects which are collaborated, the Eurasia project and the European project Open New Program. So with having this kind of webinar and exchange program and other activities, I think this program is the most advanced and well-organized program. Great thanks to the Professor Varela Asuncion for having me, and I'm great honored to participate as a speaker for this program. The topic I brought for this class is, can a peace treaty guarantee peace on the Korean Peninsula? What comes to your mind when you think of Korea? Korean idols, BTS, and Psy, and what else? Recently, Squid Game is so popular, and Korean drama, Korean culture, and K-food are very popular globally. However, from security aspect of Korea, there is serious issue. That is issue of peace treaty. From outside, it has not been focused on. However, for Korean people, it is a very sensitive issue. Generally, concluding a peace treaty is to guarantee peace to each other. However, historically, peace treaties didn't always guarantee peace. On the Korean Peninsula, the peace treaty is not concluded yet. You know, South Korea was very close to disappear on this planet. It was due to the sudden attack of North Korea to South Korea. That was Korean War, which occurred in 1950. Fortunately, South Korea was saved by United Nations forces. However, that war has not been over. That is, Korean Peninsula has been under a wartime regime still. In this lecture, when I say South Korean society and Korean people, it means South Korean society and South Korean people. You know, in North Korean people cannot discuss this matter freely because there is no freedom of speech. South Korea's Moon administration is now trying to transfer this wartime regime to a peacetime regime. Changing into a peace regime sounds ideal and nice, but now Korean people worry about Moon's attempt of concluding a peace treaty. Why? This is what today's lecture is about. More concretely, the questions that I suggest are, if peace treaty is concluded, what will happen on this Korean Peninsula? Who will be the parties of the agreement? And from this peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula, what will be the foreseeable security problems on this Korean Peninsula? Let's see the significance of issue on peace treaty. Firstly, Eurasia project aims at contribute to establish a harmonized and more stable society regionally and globally. United Nations Sustainable, the Development Goals pursue to create more a sustainable society for us and for next generation. These two projects have a common purpose. In Korean Peninsula, Korean people have lived under the threat of war due to military confrontation and conflict between South and North Korea since Korean War to now. Korean War under the Cold War regime is a kind of proxy war. It means behind the occurrence of Korean War, there were great powers. Because Korean Peninsula is geopolitically a strategic location to the great powers. Whether a peace treaty is concluded or not could determine the fate of people of Korean Peninsula. Since division between the South and North Korea, Koreans longed for unification, even if the two Koreas have claimed different approaches to unification, they cannot be compromised. North Korean leader has longed for realizing peace treaty, having knocked on United States. Because main mission of North Korea's political leader from his father and from his grandfather that never had changed is unifying Korea on their own initiative. When peace treaty is concluded, North Korea could have a better condition to realize unification by their own way. This will be the worst scenario for South Korean people. The South Korean people have never agreed with this way and never want to be under the totalitarian communist leader Kim Jong-un. However, current South Korean President Moon has attempted to realize a conclusion of peace treaty. Then he has been criticized and suspected as a communist spokesman for North Korea leader in Korean society and even in international community. Another problem with this issue is that the South-South conflict is worsening in Korean society. The South-South conflict means inside conflict of South Korea, largely between progressives versus conservatives. There is a strong ideological polarization. There are groups of various colors within the progressives and within conservatives. You know, basically the leftists and progressives in Korea are quite different from those in Europe and the Western countries. In South Korea, among leftists, there are certain groups surrounding Moon administration who follow Kim Il-sung's Juche ideology. Kim Il-sung is the first political leader in North Korea. What is Juche ideology? The first political leader in North Korea, Kim Il-sung, announced his Juche ideology in 1965. This ideology pursued a nationalist and anti-imperialist line in an environment where, at the time, the leader could no longer depend on Soviet Union after death of Stalin. This ideology was also to construct their own solid socialist country and to lead the revolution of South Korea. The revolution means that South and North Korea unification should be realized by North Korea led. Since Moon regime started in 2017, what Moon administration has done to North Korea seemed to agree and follow the North Korean way, attempting to realize a peace treaty. Many Koreans are concerned about this, and it escalates the South-South conflict. Could you guess what these pictures show? They are not exciting flash mob. They are protesters in Seoul. These pictures show one aspect of South-South conflict. The protesters used to occupy Gangneung and City Hall in the center of Seoul. The left upper picture is protest calling for the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye by many progressive leftist crowd in 2016. Right upper one is in 2017, a protest against the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye by conservative crowd. Bottom one was protesters who demanded the resignation of Moon Jae-in by conservatives 2 years ago. Confrontational issues in South-South conflict mainly consist of policies to North Korea, policies to United States and China, and issue of the clearance of colonization remains from Japan. And recently, the allegation of election fraud of the leftist has been raised by conservative side. The term of the South-South conflict started to use during the first progressive regime of Kim Dae-jung's sunshine policy to North Korea with big amount of financial support to North Korea in the late of 1990s. This policy has been criticized that it contributed to advancing the North Korea's nuclear weapon technology. Conservatives strongly opposed the sunshine policy to North Korea. From the lesson of negative effect of sunshine policy, many Korean people pose against Moon's attempting to conclude a peace treaty. Some political critics view Moon's policy as a handing over South Korea to North Korea. People who oppose this policy has been ready to go out against Moon's policy, but the square, now placed for protesters, was blocked by the government. Furthermore, under the pandemic circumstances, anti-government protests have been halted. Let me show you some basic information on the Korean Peninsula and South and North Korea. It will be helpful for you to follow the topic. As you see this map, the land of Korean Peninsula is so small, so it is sometimes called the gum attached to the continent. But it is a region that attracts attention from great powers and a region because the continental and maritime powers meet. It is surrounded by strong countries, China, Russia, and Japan. So, Korean Peninsula used to be a stepping stone for great powers to expand their power. Due to its geopolitical location, unfortunately, it was colonized by Japan for 36 years and Korean War occurred. The war was a part of expanding continental communist power. This is what happened in Korean Peninsula in 1950. The declaration of end to war and peace treaty, all these issues now were caused by the Korean War. The Korean War lasted for 3 years until 1953. The war stopped by signing an agreement. This is Armistice Agreement. It is like agreement of a temporary ceasefire between North and South Korea. With this agreement, the war was suspended up to now. The war began like this. On Sunday, June 25th, 1950, Early in the morning at 4 o'clock, North Korean forces started a surprise attack toward South Korea. South Korea didn't expect this at all, and many South Korean soldiers were on vacation because it was Sunday. At the time, I was not born yet. I used to hear what happened from my mother, that my parents with my elder sisters and brothers had to escape from battlefield to other remote places that were safe. North Korea occupied almost all territory of the South. However, United Nations forces counterattacked the North Korean forces. When the North Korean army retreated, Chinese forces joined to North Korean forces. And behind North Korean forces, also there was Soviet army. The sacrifices of both sides were too great, and the war continued for a long time, for 3 years. Both sides had been so exhausted. That was why an armistice agreement was signed. There were 2.5 million people died from this war in both sides. And most of the industrial facility and infrastructures were destroyed from this war. Let me give you a quiz. You already know that there are 2 Koreas, South Korea and North Korea. Official names are, one is DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and the other one is just Republic of Korea. Can you identify these names? Which one is from South Korea and which one is for North Korea? Yeah, DPRK is for North Korea. The word democratic people makes you confused because North Korean name doesn't fit the social and political reality of North Korea. This is a night view of Korean Peninsula seen from the satellite by NASA. You can guess how big the difference in electricity between South and North Korea. Total electricity of North Korea is only 1/23 that of South Korea. From recent statistics of CIR report, only 26% of North Korean people are supplied to use electricity. It means most of countryside people in North Korea are living without electricity. It is like almost a primitive society. This shows the economic power difference between South and North Korea. Please look at the GDP differences by year from 2010 to 2019. The blue bar tells South Korea's GDP, and the very low bar is North Korea's GDP. South Korea's nominal GDP is around 54 times greater than that of North Korea. This is a comparison of military might. Interestingly, there is not much differences in military power. Some are more dominant than South Korea. However, North Korea has terrifying long-range missiles and nuclear weapons. It makes imbalance of military power between South Korea and North Korea. In 2017, North Korea tested ICBM successfully. The ICBM is intercontinental ballistic missile, long-range missile. It means missile capacity enhanced to strike even territory of the United States. United States and its alliance consider that North Korea crossed red line. North Korea doesn't stop advancing its technology, violating NPT regime. NPT is international treaty, the non-proliferation treaty. of a nuclear weapon. Why does not North Korea give up missiles test and advanced nuclear weapons, while North Korea rather requires releasing the sanctions? Because North Korea considered that those are the only way to keep its regime. North Korea has only one political party, while South Korea has multiple political parties. North Korea is a totalitarian communist country with a centralized planned economic system, while South Korea is a capitalist country with free market economy system. North Korea is totally closed society and people are being deprived of human rights and being strongly controlled. It is like the difference of dystopian and utopian world. South Korea luckily had two wise and extraordinary political leaders, Lee Seung-man and Park Chung-hee. The first president of South Korea, Lee Seung-man, adopted a liberal democracy since independence in 1945, while Kim Il-sung of North Korea adopted a communist system. This is a big contribution to South Korea by Lee Seung-man. Another contribution is to United States. Before he became president in South Korea is the book Japan Inside Out, The Challenges of Today's by President Lee Seung-man in 1941, which was well known in the United States, was published just before Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. It has been considered that that book led the United States to know Japanese strategy in advance before the war. And regarding President Park Chung-hee, South Korea's dramatic economic growth was driven by this president, Park Chung-hee. From the achievement of these two leaders, Lee Seung-man and Park Chung-hee, now why today's prosperity of South Korea is. Here is the worst thing that is happening in North Korea. This is about human rights violation. This graph shows a number of North Korea defectors to abroad. Their end destination is South Korea. They should be through these routes, which are very dangerous journey through China and sometimes through China and then southeast. They're attempting to reach South Korea is not guaranteed. It's a very dangerous journey. Many of them were caught. If caught, what happens? They are executed or are sent to the concentration camp. This is one aspect of North Korea's livings, which is very unhappy. Can you imagine that in North Korea, there are three categories according to socio-political background: core class, wavering class, and hostile class. The core class is perceived as loyal to the regime, and the wavering class is royalty is regarded as undependable, unreliable. The hostile class is regarded as disloyal. They are most often discriminated. The accused, together with 3 generations of his family, will be imprisoned. Religious people are also classified as the hostile classes. You know the Otto Warmbier, American Jewish student who visited a tourist. He was accused of stealing propaganda poster in North Korea. He was sent back to the United States in a vegetative state and then died within a week. United States proved that his death from severe neurological injury by being tortured during his stay in North Korea. Human rights violation issue of North Korea has been focused on by international community and has been investigated by United Nations mandated Commission of Inquiry. In this regard, North Korean people should be liberated. You know, President Moon was known as a lawyer who defended human rights in South Korea. However, he has been silent on North Korea's human rights violation, and he never condemned it. Let's think about peacenik. What do you think about peacenik? Peacenik is a person who opposes wars. We all may be peaceniks. Everyone wants to live in the peaceful world. No problem, it's natural. What if a country's leader is a naive peacenik? Where would the country go? What would the fate of the country be? Historically, wars has been constant on this planet. Though most people didn't want to meet war, I believe that the leader of a country should devote himself to develop strategy and policies to deter war and to keep peace in his country. In particular, the South Korean leader should do so. Why? Because we are in a situation where the two Koreas are facing fiercely militarily each other. All previous presidents of South Korea did so, but current president doesn't. Even previous progressive president Kim Dae-jung in South Korea, who did sunshine policy to North Korea, did not cross a dangerous line that would have endangered Korean Peninsula and South Korea. According to the scientists of international politics, a naive idealist leader can be a peacekeeper if he is very, very lucky. But he can also become a peacebreaker, even he did not expect. The theoretical paradigms for dealing with international politics and the peace regime include idealism, realism, liberalism, and constructivism. It is insufficient to explain international political problems by applying only one theory. To deal with the conflict between the two Koreas and the issue of peace on Korean Peninsula, there have been two perspectives of idealism and realism which have been cycled in opposition. But it has been clear that the idealist approach based on trust makes no sense in solving problem, talking with whom used to violate international norm. The realist theorists such as Mugenso, Mearsheimer, and Dr. Lee Chung-gun, and so on, emphasize the balance of power between countries where interest between the countries conflict. The idea of an end of war declaration and peace treaty in Korean Peninsula are idealistic view. The South Korea government claims that peace treaty will alleviate the current state of confrontation and will come true peace on the Korean Peninsula. However, there are not evidences that the trust-based relations with North Korea did not work. The words peace and trust seems ideal and fantastic, but not always. There are well-known words, freedom is not free. Like this, we can say the peace is not free. As long as there is a high possibility of misuse of peace treaty by North Korea, peace treaty should not be allowed to keep peace on the Korean Peninsula. Let's see the development of debates on the peace treaty and declaration of end to war. The North Korea has for a long time insisted on a peace treaty, having tried to realize a mutual non-aggression pact with the United States and North Korea. Signing a peace treaty is one of North Korea's core strategy. Main goal of peace treaty for North Korea is to lead United States to withdraw United States forces from South Korea, making a big deal with the United States. And then North Korea can control and take over whole Korean peninsula, dismantling the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and United States alliance system. That is why all South Korean previous regimes consistently opposed concluding peace treaty. But Moon regime turned over the existing stance on peace treaty since his inauguration 2017. He is like an active supporter and proponent on a peace treaty and defends North Korea regime. Look at these pictures. Peacetime between South Korea and North Korea seems almost to come. It was the Inter-Korean Summit in 2018, and through this, the announcement of April 27 Panmunjom Declaration was released. The two Korea leaders promised to realize an end of war declaration. Furthermore, the two agreed to convert the armistice agreement into a peace agreement. After this summit, the debate over it intensified in Korean society. Opponent people consider it as a kind of a show that only looked good without any substantial change and result between the two Koreas. Since Inter-Korean Summit in 2018, what President Moon have done as president was he was like an apostle of justice for peace in a diplomatic arena. The president has stressed on peace treaty and declaration of end of war in Korean Peninsula. Every year he attended at United Nations General Assembly. Last year at the 76th United Nations General Assembly, he said that when a declaration of an end to the war is achieved, complete peace can begin with the irreversible progress in denuclearization. But the international community didn't seem to respond to him because the North Korea's having nuclear warheads might be the only way to keep North Korea leader Kim's power and regime. The international community has learned much for decades that North Korea never give up its nuclear weapons in spite of any sanctions or any aid from the international community. But Moon stated North Korea will give up it. This is why Moon has been criticized as a spokesman for Kim Jong-un, North Korea leader. Can you figure out who they are? Yeah, BTS, a global idol. They are standing at United Nations stage last year. The president accompanied them. BTS's message in this stage was good, but there is criticism in which Moon regime mobilized idols to maximize show effect for his political purpose. Finally, Moon administration managed U.S. congressional leadership to submit a bill call for a declaration of an end to the war and conclusion of peace treaty in United States, and this was sent to the United States House of Representatives on May 2021. Against this bill submission, opponents who disagree on this bill submission in United States and South Korea, conservative Republican group, it is called the CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference in the United States, and also there is KCPAC in Korea. And with them, many Korean social groups are doing active campaign against the bill. Although the passage of the bill in the United States is unlikely, but if it is passes, many Koreans worry about that the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and United States alliance system would be undermined, and the deterrence of inter-Korean war would be damaged. Then North Korea attacks to South Korea could be followed. 727 Armistice Agreement in 1953 has functioned in a wartime system. Why was the bill for peace submitted to the US Congress? Because it needs United States approval. US was a main party of Armistice Agreement as a representative of the United Nations to sign it. China, as a party, would not oppose it because North Korea and China, in their brotherhood, the relationship have posed at the same stance of peace treaty. So whether the peace treaty is concluded or not depends on United States. On the Korean Peninsula, there would be a big imbalance of military might without United States military presence in South Korea. That means the only deterrent device to war is the South Korea and United States Mutual Defense Treaty, while North Korea is armed with a long-range missile and nuclear weapon. This treaty was concluded just before signing armistice in 1953 to deter attacks by North Korea and communist allies by diplomatic efforts of first President Lee Seung-man in South Korea. United States did not agree with this treaty at first, but United States President was persuaded by President Lee Seung-man. Now, due to the Moon's pro-North Korean policy, opponents to Moon in South Korea are concerned that South Korea and United States relations have been undermined. What does the transition of war regime to peace regime means in Korean Peninsula? Signing of a peace treaty means that wartime is over. A peacetime regime starts. Turning to peacetime could rather put the Korean Peninsula in danger because of causing an imbalance of military power, as I mentioned. How come? Firstly, the United Nations command in demilitarized zone between South and North Korea will be withdrawn. United Nations command was dispatched under the Security Council resolution of United Nations right after outbreak of Korean war. The main mission of United Nations Council command in the border between South Korea and North Korea is to maintain the ceasefire, monitoring North Korean provocation, threats based on the United Nations Charter and spirit. It is a symbol of deterring war on the Korean Peninsula up to now. Secondly, United States forces in South Korea should be withdrawn also when it turns to peacetime. There is no reason overstaying United States military base in peacetime in South Korea. South Korea doesn't have nuclear weapons, but North Korea illegally possesses nuclear weapons against the NPT regime. The South Korea without umbrella will be in big trouble due to this North Korea's overwhelming forces with nuclear weapon. This is the condition exactly what North Korea prefers. Another problem after signing peace treaty is that in case of North Korea's attack to South Korea, the deployment of US troops to Korean Peninsula in peacetime could not be done immediately. You know, today's war runs so quickly with advanced high technology, but to send United States forces to Korean Peninsula due to peace regime, it will take time to be through US Congress approval according to United States law. So United States supportive forces could not correspond to war immediately. In fact, the greatest threat to peace on the Korean Peninsula is North Korea's possession of a nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, the international community has repeatedly failed in negotiation for North Korea's nuclear disarmament. The most recent example was Hanoi summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in 2019. Before the summit on diplomatic table, North Korea have pledged and gestured to uphold the CBID principle to eliminate these nuclear weapons. The CBID principle is complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement of nuclear weapon and its facility. United States caught in advance that North Korea only made the gesture of giving up its nuclear weapons, trying to gain only some benefits from the summit. So the summit was not successful. No deal happened. This kind of happening of North Korea has been repeated in diplomatic tables. Let's see another pessimistic view of peace treaty from the international politics theory based on historical evidence. They will show how fragile peace treaties have been. A peace regime means that peace is guaranteed legally and institutionally based on peace agreements. However, there are many cases of a war occurrence right after the signing of peace treaty. Victor Cheverlis, in the 19th century, he proved that from 1500s BC to 1860 AD, no less than about 8,000 peace treaties were signed. Each one was supposed to secure permanent peace, but each one was lasting on an average 2 years. Let me give you some examples. In 1938, British Prime Minister Chamberlain signed and declared the Munich Agreement with Hitler, peace for our time. Then a year later, there was a Germany's invasion of Poland. This was beginning of Second World War. Another case is in January 1973, there was the Paris Agreement, peace agreement ending the Vietnam War, but 2 years later, North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam. Then South Vietnam collapsed. Another case is there is also a case of a League of Nations. League of Nations was established right after the First World War in 1920 by suggestion of Woodrow Wilson. He was the idealist, politician, president of the United States, and scientist of politics. The League of Nations was unable to effectively deal with aggression, policies of fascism, militarism, Germany, Italy, Japan. Then it was broken by occurrence of Second World War. According to scientists of international politics, realists of international politics, countries that are originally peaceful do not need such a peace treaty. If countries attempt to have that kind of treaty, it means there is a high probability of a war between them. In this regard, peace treaty on Korean Peninsula will lead a higher possibility of a war. Let's see the contemporary theories of war by mainly the realist of international politics. This theory is based on national interest, morality, and human nature. These perspectives have been the dominant mainstream theory since Second World War. The logic is this: human seeks profit rather than evil. The pursuit of power is almost instinctive. The state is not moral. International relations have an anarchic nature, and everyone is desperate for survival. Regarding the morality, even if an individual is moral, he or she cannot be always moral as long as he or she belongs to a certain state, having some obligation and responsibility under its law and leadership system. The level of morality of country and individual are quite different. All countries place the highest importance on national interest, that is, no war without interest. What does national interest consist of? Components of national interest are SPPP by the scientist Lee Chung-gun. Those are survival, power, prosperity, and prestige of honor. British Prime Minister Palmerston in 19th century, he said that there are no permanent alliances and no permanent enemies between nations. There is only eternal national interest, and theorists affirm that true peace lies in the establishment of a military deterrence. Military intentions are variable. There could be disguise and deception of expression. For example, North Korea used to say that we will not use this nuclear weapon anywhere. However, North Korea has threatened with frequent local provocation and sometimes saying that we are ready to fire Seoul. The theory I mentioned above reminds that to keep peace in Korean Peninsula, military deterrence should be maintained. Let me conclude my, the lectures. We have seen the specific circumstance of a security maintenance system on the Korean Peninsula since the Korean War. Turning to peace regime by concluding a peace treaty will rather put Korean Peninsula at risk, resulting in imbalance of military force between South and North Korea. We have seen also precedents showing how fragile peace treaties are. The signing peace treaties attacked each other within 2 years after signing the peace treaties. In other words, peace treaties functioned only as a means of buying time for a re-invasion. Regarding Moon regime's putting efforts for realizing a peace treaty, is a major party for peace treaty, the United States administration has never given a positive response so far, as well as there is no optimistic atmosphere for the bill submitted in the US Congress. In this regard, the Moon administration's attempts for a peace treaty seems to have a low probability of success. This gives lessons reminding us of that dismantling North Korea's nuclear weapon is prerequisite President Moon's tenure is almost coming to end. Despite the unprecedented inclusion policy to North Korea by him, North Korea is acting more aggressively to South Korean international community now. Recently, in January this year, North Korea tested offensive missiles, including ICBM, 7 times. They could put Korean Peninsula at the risk of war. However, I recommend that the South Korean International Committee must continue to persuade North Korea for denuclearization and must seek a multifaceted approach way for peace on the Korean Peninsula. This is all I have. Through this lecture, I hope it is helpful for you to understand the security aspect of Korea. Thank you for your attention. Bye.